Okay, to make up for yesterday's flip 5 being a flip 10, we're going to today just simply quickly go through the vocab words. It is in your worksheet packet you did over the last 2 days, but let's go over these words to make sure you know what they all mean. Now, trait, we actually talked about trait on Monday. A trait is simply a characteristic that gets passed down by parent to offspring. A trait in general is just any trait. But the traits we talk about are the ones that are genetically passed down, so they have to be um, coded for by genes and chromosomes. Trait. Everybody got trait? The next word, and this is in the order that they are in the textbook, of course, not in the order that they are in in, in your notes. It says here heredity is the passing of traits from one generation to the next. And this is what Mendel was studying quite literally. He was looking at the inheritance. He didn't know about genes, he didn't know about chromosomes, he didn't know about the nucleus of the cell. So heredity, the word inheriting, it's the same root to the word. So heredity, simply passing things down from one generation to the next. Next word, genetics. Now, so this is a little confusing. Genetics actually has the word gene in it, right? Genetics is the scientific study of heredity. It's more high tech, and you're actually studying genes. So when they say that Mendel is the father of modern genetics, he was just looking at traits and counting how many showed up. He didn't know about genes, so he's the father of modern genetics, but technically he wasn't exactly studying genetics in the way we do now. So kind of a fine difference, but genetics with the word gene, studying genes in a more high-tech way. Heredity, studying inheritance. Make sense? Next, purebred. And again, we looked at this yesterday when we talked about Mendel and his true breeding plants. He bred those pea plants over and over and over, tall pea plants with tall pea plants, and taking those same seeds. They only made other tall pea plants. And so he called them true breeding or purebred. Purebred. And somebody in one of the classes said, well, how did he know those ones are purebred? The way he knew is from continually rebreeding those same ones, and that's the only thing they passed on. He had no other way to tell. He couldn't look inside, but it's true breeding. Now, when we think of purebred, we think of an animal like a horse or a dog that has not just one trait that's purebred, but lots of traits that are very, very similar, right? And that next week we're actually going to come up with another word, more scientific, for the to look at, because purebred just for one trait is not quite accurate. But we all know purebred dogs, they're all going to look the same. This is a purebred German Shepherd here. This is a purebred Belgian Malinois, which is a different type of shepherd. But they look the same, right? You look at this dog, you know what type of dog it is because it has those distinctive traits. Alrighty, then hybrid. Hybrid then is going to be a mix, a mutt. It has different genes for a particular trait. It's big T, little t for height. And in the hybrid case, that's when you're going to be able to pass down a trait that you're not showing. You still carry that gene, but you're just not showing that trait. So the hybrid is a mix. And you can remember that because a hybrid car has both a gasoline and an electric engine. It's hybrid. It has both. It's a mix. And then gene. A gene is a factor that controls a trait. Gregor Mendel didn't know about genes. He said there's some sort of factor. There's something that's being passed down. And it turns out he was correct, but he didn't know exactly what was going on. And again, over the next couple of weeks, we'll talk about a little bit more about this. But last week we talked about DNA. The DNA molecule, DNA makes up genes. Genes make up chromosomes. And so if you have a chromosome here, each of these little sections here are genes, and each of those are made up of strands of DNA. And then finally, the word that everybody has a hard time pronouncing, allele. 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 And alleles are different forms of the gene. So you could say the plant has one tall allele and one short allele. Okay? A big T and a little t. For eye color, you could have blue alleles or brown alleles. Alrighty, I believe that is everything for our quick flipped 5 for today. Let's see. Oh, I was wrong. Dominant and recessive. The dominant allele is the one that's in control. It's dominant. It dominates the trait. It covers up the other trait. It covers up the recessive trait. And recessive, or receding, or hiding, the recessive trait is hidden when the dominant allele is present. So, and then we did the hybrid again there. But the recessive trait will only show up if you have 2 copies of that. The dominant allele will show up and cover up the other one. Now, kids usually ask, well, how do you know which trait is the dominant trait or the recessive trait? How would you know? Yeah. Excellent. So if somebody's already told you, you look at the letters and it's the capital letter. But the researchers, how did Mendel know what's the dominant trait? The only way they know is by experimenting. The way he knew that tall was dominant is when he crossed a true breeding tall and a true breeding short. The true breeding tall was the trait that showed up. So there's no way to know which trait's dominant until you do some test crosses.